What is everybody? Kyle Murray from FTN Network, and it's middle of July. That means it is best ball draft season here in the swing of things for your Underdog and DraftKings best ball tournaments. And I'm here to break down some of my favorite drafts and my most drafted stacks here for this upcoming best ball season. Now, again, teams like Tampa Bay, Dallas, we don't need to talk about these guys a whole lot. Kansas City Chiefs, you don't need me to tell you that these are stackable and strong stacks to target here for your best ball drafts. But I'm going to be bringing you four of my favorite stacks to target and honestly my most drafted teams as of now. So let's get right into it. Talking about team number one, that's the New York Giants. Now, the New York Giants strike me as a team with a ton of upside. Maybe not the most consistent team, but my favorite part about this Giant stack is that they're probably not going to be your primary stack. Oftentimes in drafts, they're going to be your secondary stack here based on where you're getting these guys. When you're looking at the ADP of all the players in the passing offense outside of Saquon Barkley, you can kind of consider him as being involved in the passing offense. But outside of running backs, only one player inside the top 100 of ADP over on Underdog, and that's Kadarius Toney, who's in the 80 to 85 range. So very easy to make this stack work. You're not reaching on a ton of players, not having to pay up a whole lot for this Giants team. And I think a big part of that from the public is that you look at all these guys, right? All these not necessarily big names, but somewhat recognizable names and players that you can kind of see having a role in this offense. Guys like Kadarius Toney, Kenny Galladay, Sterling Shepard, even Darius Slayton, and obviously newly drafted rookie Wan'Dale Robinson. With all of these guys, all of these, this cast of guys here, we don't necessarily know where the roles are going to shake out to be. But for best ball, that's not necessarily as much of a problem. You draft 2-3 of these guys here to pair with Daniel Jones, and you feel pretty good that a lot of times when the Giants have a strong week, when Daniel Jones has a strong week, you're going to get good production from these pass catchers as well, especially guys like Toney and Galladay. I like a ton. Now, in terms of breaking down how I want to approach stacking these Giants guys, I love Kadarius Toney. He's one of my favorite mid-round wide receiver targets. So starting with him is priority A for a Giant stack, pairing him with Daniel Jones. And after that, I'm looking to either correlate that with one of Kenny Galladay, Sterling Shepard, or Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, I'm not necessarily as keen on taking a shot on Darius Slayton, but if you're drafting him in one of your last picks and you already have, maybe Toney paired with Daniel Jones, you missed out on guys like Galladay or Shepard, I don't mind taking a stab on someone like Darius Slayton there at the end of the draft, but I do prefer guys like Shepard, Wan'Dale Robinson prior to Slayton. But that's the best way, in my opinion, to draft around these Giant stacks. Again, I love their week-to-week upside. We saw it at times last year, especially with Kadarius Toney. We saw him put up multiple 25-plus fantasy point games. And then obviously with Kenny Galladay, we haven't really seen it in a few years, but back when he was on the Lions, we saw several games where he was the go-to guy in the red zone. He kind of strikes me as a player who has that double touchdown upside every single week. So if we can kind of capitalize on those from those two guys, I really like what we can get from the Giants. I like what they kind of did in terms of the offseason, going out and getting Brian Daboll from the Buffalo Bills. We've seen him take advantage of a lot of weapons there in Buffalo over the past couple of years in the passing offense. So I have a lot of high expectations for this Giants team. And additionally, looking at their schedule, their matchups, I created an advanced strength of schedule tool that you can check out over at FTNFantasy.com. And the Giants have the third best projected schedule according to that model that I created. So really like the spot here overall for the Giants, like their weapons, like their matchups, all that stuff. So New York Giants, probably my favorite stack to target here in Underdog best ball drafts. But let's get into team number two. This team could arguably be looped into, the Chiefs, Buccaneers, Rams type, trio, or I guess, or tier of guys or teams that we don't really necessarily need to talk about too much. We know how good they are, but I want to talk about this team because they're one of my favorite teams to stack this season. It's the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going right back to them. I was very high on them last year. I was very high on Jamar Chase. And honestly, I felt like I probably should have had even more exposure to these guys and to this team based on how much I like them. So I'm probably trying to just double down here. But again, I'm not going to miss the boat here. If there's any sort of fade or maybe people not being as high on them as they want to be based on that Super Bowl hangover narrative or whatever that may be, I'm totally willing to jump on that and take advantage of people maybe not necessarily taking advantage of this team in general enough. Now, Jamar Chase obviously going to be a top pick, first round pick, middle of the first round is where you're kind of going to be sitting at him. But if you do get one of those 5, 6, 7 picks and you're lucky enough to get Jamar Chase, who I have as wide receiver 2 this season, pairing him with Joe Burrow later down the road makes a ton of sense. Now, a big tricky part in terms of stacking here is, do you want to include T. Higgins in that stack? It's probably going to cost you a third, maybe fourth round pick if you're lucky. Probably tough to do in terms of stacking up this Bengals team, but you can definitely get creative here. Jamar Chase plus Joe Burrow. Later on in the round, later on in the draft, you look at someone like Tyler Boyd, who was wide receiver 31 last year, averaged over 11 PPR points per game. Totally fine with that kind of production. If you're going to be having a Cincinnati stack, you're kind of counting on them being a top 5 passing offense. So in top 5 passing offense, you're definitely going to have weeks where that wide receiver 3 pays off. But someone I really like in your last pick, maybe second to last pick as a tight end. Tight end typically not a position that I'm loving this season. Hayden Hurst here I think is a much more capable pass catching tight end than CJ Uzomah. And we saw CJ Uzomah have 2 weeks last season with 25 plus point performances. You get that from Hayden Hurst, and that pretty much pays off his draft position. Now, again, I am hoping for a little bit more consistent production and obviously a little bit more prolonged success there for Hayden Hurst. But even if he gives you 2-3 weeks where he's going to be sliding in there as your tight end, that's worth the ADP there in the later portions of the draft, especially as a tight end. So Cincinnati is stack number 2 that I love to target. Now, stack number 3 is going to be a team that I guess could be also considered in that top tier of teams, but I don't think that the public is necessarily as high on this offense as they are, teams like the Rams and the Buccaneers and the Chiefs, but they're probably a top 10 offense in the public's eyes, and that's the Denver Broncos. Now, I see this as a perfect merger between Russell Wilson and what's going to be left of the Denver Broncos from last year. Obviously, they bring in a new coaching staff, which I think is a significant upgrade from a fantasy perspective, but you're talking about a staff of wide receivers and pass catchers and just overall offensive weapons like Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, and then the 2 tight ends there in Greg Dulcich and Albert O. Now, that's a pretty significantly deep roster of pass catching and offensive weapons that you can argue that Seattle just never really had for Wilson in some years now, especially the past few years in the Lockett and Metcalf era. Now, with Seattle, you have Lockett and Metcalf, 2 very, very good wide receivers, arguably one of the best duos in football in terms of a wide receiver position. But after that, you're looking pretty stretched thin. Not a lot of tight ends. Obviously, they're adding Noah Fant now, but that did us no good for Russell Wilson the past couple of years. But back in Seattle, you're talking about a team that would go out of their way to keep the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands, consistently running the ball more often than I think that's probably made sense. Russell Wilson is pretty much undebatable a top 10 quarterback in the NFL these days, and especially over the past 3 years. And for them to be a team that's running the ball 48% of the time or more twice over the last 3 seasons, this doesn't really add up a whole lot. Now, the Broncos have been pretty adamant. They're going to allow Russell Wilson to throw a lot more here, and I think that makes a ton of sense. I think it would be kind of foolish to see otherwise. Getting him out of that Seattle environment where they were such a run-heavy team, I think is going to go a very long way. And it's not like he doesn't have weapons here. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. They're actually seeing Sutton go in drafts before Jeudy, but both of these guys I think are very good options. It's going to be tough to get both of these guys and stack him with Wilson, but I'm actually totally fine with that. You go with one of Jeudy or Sutton, pair him with Russell Wilson, and then later down in the draft, you're looking at a guy like Tim Patrick there. And then if you miss out on him, you even have a guy like KJ Hamler, who I am very optimistic that he's going to have at least 1 or 2 weeks where he pops off and has those big spike weeks. I like him quite a bit. Now, if you're looking at tight ends, you have Albert O, Greg Dulcich, who was a 3rd-round pick. Obviously, they're going to make some use of him there as well. We've seen Russell Wilson get the job done with tight ends of lesser caliber, lesser names than these 2 guys here in the past. So no doubt that Wilson can get it done with these 2 as well. So love the weapons here, love the value, love kind of where you're going, where they're going here in drafts on Underdog as of right now. So love the Broncos stack as a whole. They're one of my favorite stacks of this season. And finally, let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles here. Now, the buzz around Jalen Hurts is at an all-time high, and it's deservedly so. I mean, the guy has been fantastic. Especially when you're talking about his rushing production. And when you can get a quarterback that has that much rushing upside, it's obviously going to catapult him into that realm of top 5, top 3 quarterback potential that many quarterbacks just simply don't have. We've seen it with Josh Allen, we've seen it with Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray at times. So these guys who have the elite rushing production and the elite rushing upside just inherently have this added upside to their fantasy potential. Now, when you're considering that top 5%, top 1% outcome of Jalen Hurts being your quarterback 1, now you have to draft him as your quarterback 1 if you're looking to kind of build a team around Jalen Hurts. Now, if that were to happen and you're drafting him as your QB1 and you're thinking about in a world where Jalen Hurts carries my team to being the team that has a chance to win whatever best ball tournament, whatever fantasy tournament you're competing in, what's that going to look like, right? It's probably going to look like a top 3 quarterback season, right? Maybe even quarterback 1, quarterback 2, but top 3 is that top 1 to 5% outcome that you're seeking, right? Especially in these larger field tournaments that you need. You need to keep in mind that when you are playing in these tournaments with thousands of other people, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people, you need to consider the fact that you are seeking that 1% outcome. Now, if that were to be the case here for Jalen Hurts, in my opinion, it's going to be top 3 quarterback in all of fantasy football. And if that were to happen, it's going to have to come with some passing production and probably some damn good passing production. I don't think that just the rushing production is going to quite cut it in terms of getting him a top 3 quarterback finish. Now, I think it's going to help a ton, but in terms of getting him that to be that QB 1 or 2 or 3, you're going to need some passing production. And if he's going to have a strong passing season, you're going to see wide receivers for the Eagles also have good seasons as well. Guys like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, those 3 guys, I absolutely love getting them in drafts, pairing them up with Jalen Hurts. So probably 2 of those guys is the ideal scenario if you're drafting Jalen Hurts, because again, I do feel like that elite season is going to come with some strong passing production if Jalen Hurts were to have that QB1 type season. And even looking at a guy like Miles Sanders, who's a pretty significant value according to my projections, I have him as a RB2, and I don't know if he's necessarily getting drafted like that consistently. So I love Miles Sanders in drafts. He's one of my favorite mid-round running back targets. I don't even mind pairing him with Jalen Hurts. Now, probably not going overboard and drafting A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Miles Sanders, but maybe in a world where you miss out on A.J. Brown, maybe you go Devontae Smith and you go Miles Sanders, and then you're looking at a nice little trio right there of Eagles. But in terms of the viability of stacking Sanders with Hurts, I think that's more than fine. He definitely has some pass catching upside. We've seen it over the past couple years, and I like him overall as a mid-round running back. So those are my 4 favorite stacks and my 4 most drafted stacks so far this season. Number 1 is the New York Giants. Like them a ton here. I love their week-to-week upside. Maybe not as consistent as others, but I like them a ton. And again, they have the 3rd best matchups per my advanced strength of schedule tool over at FTNFantasy.com. Number 2, Cincinnati Bengals. Number 3 is the Denver Broncos, who have the 4th best strength of schedule per that model over at FTN Fantasy. And then the Eagles, who have the 6th best projected schedule for this upcoming season, is stack number 4. So absolutely love those 4 stacks this season. Highly recommend going out there and getting these guys and these teams in your Underdog and DraftKings best ball tournaments and teams. Now, keep in mind, we're going to have some more content coming for you guys from the best ball scene coming forward. I actually have a couple of videos planned coming up here. It's going to be next one talking about how to leverage high ADP players, guys who are going in the first couple of rounds here. If they were to have bad seasons, how can we leverage those opportunities, and how can you do that through stacking? So that'll be the next video that we're going to touch on. And after that, we're going to have another video coming out talking about my favorite value and sneaky stacks for best ball drafts. So anything that you guys want to see, please keep us posted. Find me on Twitter at KMurDFS. Shoot me a DM in our Discord. But again, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. We're going to be pushing out tons of content like this throughout the season, as well as betting and DFS content. So please stay up to date here at FTN Network. Appreciate all your support. We'll see you guys next time.